possibly one of our closest customers geographically, Peter Reid at Bath University. I could probably step out my front door and throw a stone that would go through his office window right now, although he's probably not at work. Anyway, Peter is, so Bath Spa changed the way that they interact, not just with the UK Federation, but with the OpenAthens products that they used in order to do that. And so he's really talking about the change of identity and potentially on the onward potential loss of personalisation. And Peter Reid is the Digital Services Librarian at Bath Spa University. So take it away, Peter.
Thank you very much. Just going to share my screen here. Great, bear with me.
Yeah, we can see that.
Great. And you can hear me okay?
Yes. We can't
Great.
see. Oh, here it comes. Yeah, all perfect. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, as was said, I'm from Bath Spa University, a small university in the southwest of England, near to Jisk, and I'm going to talk to you today a bit about my experiences and my perspective, really, as a librarian within an institution, working quite a bit in access management and in the area of personalisation, which has been talked about quite a bit. So some of the tensions and trade-offs in that area between the usability as a value and privacy as a value, and perhaps how that played out specifically in a bit of a case study of the migration of our single sign-on software, as was said, over the past couple of years. Got a few kind of thoughts and speculations on the value of the library's role in that, and also finally to ask the question, are we moving to a scenario where we have competing identity providers? So I'll explain what I mean by that towards the end. But you probably don't need to know by now what is personalization, but just knowing more about a user in order to tailor a service more to them, I guess, as a starting definition. This is a screenshot here from within Bath Spa, our VLE, and we've used a single sign-on attribute for the user and some data coming from our student record system to tailor some of the content to this particular user would be an art and design student, so there's some resources relevant to them, and there's their librarian and contact details. We've also linked it up to another university system now hosted elsewhere. It's Capita's Soprano, and it's the students' data about their library use, library fines perhaps, and loans. I've got one fine. Sorry, it's not me, it's the test user with one fine. So it's kind of within the institution, within our walls, so to speak. We have engaged in some of this ourselves, but I'm more focused on personalization outside the institution. So I mean, with our third-party services, where it's more often a case of managing preferences and how that works through single sign-on, kind of leveraged through single sign-on. And often it will be a simple case of a journals platform or one of the JISC resources on the left there. It's a saved search that I made, and there's my accounts on Elsevier Science Direct there, which may have recommendations, you know, all through the individual username and password, which of course is the source of much of the huge kind of data businesses that have emerged over the past decade or so. But as has been said, you know, the publisher asks us for information in the form of SAML attributes. Richard Burkitt touched on that dynamic, and other speakers have as well. And that can be in the form of, you know, a request for attributes related to those particular things about a user, their first name, their last name, simple assertion of what the institution they're coming from. We've seen it also happening perhaps sometimes via a CSV file or an XML upload of all users to a third-party platform. And as in the two cases, the two screenshots here, more and more we see with bigger platforms that the authorization decision is made for the user, and then they're asked to fill in those attributes afterwards. And just the question or the feeling there is kind of, how do we respond as an institution, as a library with a voice on the in this area of work? There may be the feeling that we are giving away a commodity, as it's seen sometimes. That whole data is the new oil. Probably an old hat now, but that's something that's been out there for a while. Or, you know, perhaps a feeling anyway, we're underserving the reader's ethical or legal right to privacy by design, privacy by default. So I'm kind of speaking from that perspective. And what are the risks? Perhaps it's worth considering, because there has to be a balance struck between these two values. You can't have 100% perhaps usability, 100% privacy. It's worth considering that. I was interested to read in a HEPI study that students are fine with their data being used to predict students' performance in the future. 77% is a high number compared to some of the I don't know, Google or Facebook that have suffered some reputational damage in this area more recently. That study was looking at sharing within the institution and using that data within the institution. With access management, we're talking about sharing the data with third parties, and that wasn't considered so much. I may be the only one who feels this way. I sometimes feel a bit like, just as a personal consumer, and perhaps also when brokering access to resources, are we paying twice? It feels sometimes like we pay a subscription fee, but then we're also giving away. The more data we give away, it feels like we're paying, because some services have that trade-off of free. Their services are free, but you're paying with your data. Perhaps that's the feeling with Google, at least anyway. So, but I do accept, as I say, we do this within the institution as well. We're all under pressure to improve impact and demonstrate our value, particularly within libraries. So is there a way that the user benefits of personalisation from my position can be sustained in access management, and a better balance with privacy struck? So as a standards and privacy conscious perhaps librarian, I've always been a fan of this particular attribute, again, which Richard from EBSCO mentioned, EduPerson Targeted ID, a SAML attribute, which I think by design and theory is privacy preserving, or more privacy preserving than other unique IDs. Can't be used by a third party service to monitor an individual behavior across services. I've got my own targeted ID value there for our library management system at the bottom. There's the encrypted user ID at the end. So it's unique for the particular service there, which is the library management system, and our university, which is the first bit of data there, baspar.ac.uk. It's a good standard to work towards then, but are there challenges or trade-offs resulting from adhering to this standard? And just the project that gave the talk its name, change of identity, loss of personalization. We had a particular challenge when we moved to a new identity provider, in that unique ID for those services couldn't be recreated across the two. So the tensions did come to the fore there, really. I've got as my boss, Richard, on the left, and our information security advisor, some of the project members. So it was important for the library to work with the IT unit very closely there. It's a photo I took on a photo course at Bath University, standing in front of our media wall with a significant security barrier behind them. Anyway, it was... what we faced is potentially a lot of loss of students' work almost that are on these third-party platforms. So with something like a reference management system like RefWorks, it's lots of references used in assignments. Flagship databases like Box of Broadcast, which students use a lot, and we market to them a lot as well. So there would have been quite a big impact. So we had to kind of consider that. And it was good, as I said, that the library was involved in this, because perhaps that user impact might not have been understood within the project otherwise. So we were considering the option of updating all of these user accounts with 10 to 15,000 user accounts across different platforms on the day that we changed our identity provider, which would have been a lot of coordination. We called that the Big Bang approach. In the end, the supplier of the identity provider, Overt, wrote a script for us to generate the old values for all users on those services. So it would keep on generating that for every user we've got. And I've said rolling drawbridges, or rather, I don't know if the metaphor works. So as they went through their graduated, and it would only be postgraduates and staff who would still be subject to this. So it would preserve their data, but their data, I mean their work on those platforms. But that was the plan. But we did use it, and it worked for the migration. It was fine. But as the Shibboleth standard changed, I think we were left vulnerable to it breaking by last summer. So we had to revert last summer to that Big Bang approach. It was a lot of work, and involved working with spreadsheets like this. You can see the old value there, the new value. I mean, what a spreadsheet that is. I've redacted the actual usernames there on the left. That's what I'm saying. The result is, yeah, we did do it, and the result was nothing happened. So it was one of those IT projects where the success was we didn't get any credit. It's one of the reasons I'm doing trying to make it into a talk now. But in that small way, it's one example of how usability and privacy was balanced, because nobody noticed anything. Things continued on as normal. If we would have used a more personally identifiable information as that unique ID, then we wouldn't have had to make that trade-off. The question I'm asking is, was the extra work we did there as a library and collaborating with IT and with the suppliers and all of that, which takes a bit of time, was that a better trade-off than accepting a more casual erosion of users' privacy with a different identifier? So as you can see, I'm asking lots of questions here. This is a rather complex diagram, but sort of tries to explain the dynamic I'm talking about. We have a choice if we have a voice on the identity provider, to release those attributes into the wider sphere of competition, or keep them within for the students' benefit a little bit more as well. Or indeed, as has been said, keeping it more private, keeping it the value of privacy more. That could be the choice, but at least there would be the choice there. So I guess I'm trying to touch on a bit of questions of empowerment, really. As I said, our liaison and collaboration with IT is very important for libraries in this area, and something we've done a lot of. We actually bought our first identity provider as a library, so got involved in that early on in 2012. Libraries, of course, have that traditional commitment to privacy, which has been disrupted a bit, but it's an important place to be, to maintain that. And especially perhaps when we consider how the bigger publishers are pivoting to data-based businesses, as any web-based business would indeed, and these days, and becoming identity providers themselves. For example, the Elsevier account linking to Scopus, Mendeley, and that sort of thing. An interesting case, just to finish with, is in this regard, is LinkedIn Learning. So that used to be lynda.com, a resource which a lot of institutions will be providing access to. Now the drive for personalization there is backed by a massively well-used social network and a huge corporation like in Microsoft. Fantastic resource. We have seen, while there's two identities which the access to the resource is dependent on at this point, if the user chooses to link their LinkedIn account to the single sign-on identity, and that actually kind of at first certainly erodes the user experience a little bit, and can do. So I think it was just very interesting for me to witness that happening, and that's I've ended with the question, which is the primary identity. And I could probably talk a bit more about that, but I'll wind it up. But I'm not sure whether this is going to be a more common dilemma in the future, but I think it's worth posing the question, where should the primary identity be managed from in the future, within the institution or outside? I'm speculating now, and would you believe it, there's a debate coming up, so I'm going to be on the panel there, so that's why I'm asking lots of questions, really. But I hope to have demonstrated that the identity provider, and hopefully maybe the library of voice within that, is a place where we might begin to get to grips with these sorts of questions. And indeed, any questions from you?
I've got a couple of questions of my own, Peter, but like you, I don't necessarily want to anticipate the panel that's coming.
Sure, yeah.
After the next session. We do have one question that's come in, though. I'd be interested to hear Peter's thoughts on the use of the R&S bundle, and I think that's the research and scholarship attribute category that Reflex are promoting. Have BASPAR given that any consideration?
I've only just started reading about that sort of thing. I would like to know more about it. I've got to admit that I don't know about that. I do know that there are attributes. Yeah, it's something to do with the seamlessaccess.org initiative, perhaps?
The concept predates RA21 and seamless access, but seamless access are absolutely trying to promote it as a reasonably lightweight way of authorizing users, or perhaps a subset, either entire institutions or maybe a subset of users at an institution much more easily.
Yeah, so I think in keeping with what I've been saying, I think it's taken a bit of work for me personally and my boss to learn a bit about SAML and all that sort of thing down the years to be able to talk with IT about this sort of thing. So I think something like that, which bundles it and makes it a bit more easy for libraries to be that kind of intermediary, will only be a good thing for more and more people. And as I said, it's about empowerment. So yeah, I'm keen to learn a bit more about that. Yeah.
Sure. And I think potentially that links back again to what Chicago State was saying in the first session in this section about deciding what attributes to release, and potentially then what falls under the research and scholarship category. Another question has come in. Oh, okay. Tom de Moranville of Orchid has actually just clarified that the research and scholarship bundle, it consists, just because we do have maybe a minute or two in hand, it consists of the following required data elements: a shared user ID, a person's name, an email address, and one optional data element, maybe an affiliation. So yeah.
I guess it contains email address, I suppose. I don't know why email address would have to be part of that, but I've not done wider reading around that. That's just the only question I would have.
Yeah, I'm coming to it new myself, or fairly new myself.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's potentially somewhat early days for that to be in widespread use yet.
Yeah.
Another question's come in. We made the switch to OpenAthens relatively recently and have needed from time to time to use the ability to see a user's name or email address in the OpenAthens admin dashboard as part of the troubleshooting process. Assuming there's a move to a pseudonymous identifier, would it remove that ability, or is Peter just talking about what's passed to the content provider?
It's just what's passed to the content provider, yeah. I do remember a chap called Andy Anderson from OpenAthens doing the training, because we used to have OpenAthens LA, a different product from OpenAthens, which I think has been discontinued. And I think he mentioned this, and I think he was just talking about this is just keeping the value within the institution. And I remember, I've never forgot him saying that. That was back in 2013. So yeah, similarly, yeah, there's so much data within institutions, I guess, and many initiatives to do more with that. But yeah, I am only talking, just to clarify, yeah, about that release externally. That's
Sure.
the
Okay. And then I guess you mentioned it briefly partway through your presentation about how the ability, as you've just mentioned, keeping it within your estate, but being able to track users' usage and then tracking that or linking it to learning outcomes. Now, I know that speaking to some, like when I go to trade fairs in the US, especially, maybe this is true in other countries around the world as well, but there are some librarians who think user privacy absolutely trumps things like information like learning outcomes. I'm not aware of a similar opinion or body of opinion here in the UK, but is that just my ignorance, or is it just much more of a concern in the US?
As far as I've done reading around this and a bit of networking, I think it is much more a concern in the US. But I suppose I'm interested in that. I'm interested in the library as a traditional space and the institution of the university as it's probably quite a quaint idea, 3 years away from the market, I suppose, and how even working within technology, can we still provide some of these values, I guess? Is it possible, and is it indeed something which students will value? I know it's certainly something which is a library value and has been. I guess it's, yeah, I'm interested to hear more of people's opinions on this in the debate that's coming up, really.
Yeah.
Sorry, I might have failed to answer the actual question there. Sorry.
Well, but it's hard. I mean, I think you speak to 5 different librarians, you potentially end up with 5 different answers. I think there is a range of opinions out there. And a couple of weeks ago, I stumbled across a podcast called The Authority File, which talks about the various aspects of a librarian's life, and often with a technical angle. And they're partway through a 4-episode series on seamless access itself. and also this privacy and personalization. So that's called the authority file. So if anybody's interested, they could probably find it with their podcast provider. I think, okay, I think that's it for questions now. So Peter, many thanks for an excellent presentation. I know we're going to see you again in about 20 minutes in the panel debate. So thanks again to Peter.
Very welcome, thank you.
Next